Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to talk about some of the worst feuds in wrestling history. Feuds that you wish would just end, but they never did. They just kept going on, and they led to really bad matches, or just really bad promos, or just feuds that hurt the wrestling business and made you not want to watch, made you want to just stop being a fan. Feuds that gave you nightmares. Well, maybe not. That's pushing it a bit too far. But yeah, there was some pretty bad feuds over the years in wrestling history. I asked people on Facebook and Twitter for their input, and I got a lot of responses as usual. So I'm going to go over some of these feuds here and give my thoughts. Let's start off with Kane versus Gene Snitsky from 2004. Kane planted the demon seed in Lita, and she was pregnant, and then Snitsky caused Lita to have a miscarriage. This is your storyline here. I mean, come on now. And Snitsky did come up with the famous line, "It wasn't my fault." But besides that, that one highlight, that catchphrase, this feud was just terrible. And they had one segment where Snitsky punted a fake baby into the crowd. And for some reason, WWE loved this segment. They consider it to be one of the all-time great Raw moments. I consider it to be one of the dumbest moments in Raw history, personally. This feud led to some very bad matches between these two. I mean, they were awful. So the less said about this feud, I think, the better. Next up, Undertaker versus Giant Gonzales. Wow, was this ever bad. Undertaker had some rough matches in the early 90s. I mean, he was in there with some guys that absolutely did not bring out the best in him. And Giant Gonzales was one of those guys. I mean, the guy could barely move. And we were treated to two back-to-back awful Undertaker matches, the first being at WrestleMania 9, often considered to be one of the worst WrestleMania matches of all time. And then the follow-up at SummerSlam. And that, too, was an awful match. Why you would do a follow-up, who knows? But, yeah, just a brutal feud, and it lasted 8 or 9 months. Giant Gonzales actually made his debut at the Rumble and attacked The Undertaker. So this thing went on 9 months too long, let's put it that way. Hulk Hogan versus The Ultimate Warrior in WCW. They had a classic feud in WWE. They had their big match at WrestleMania 6, something that everybody remembers highly of. But then Hulk Hogan brought the Ultimate Warrior to WCW, and I think we all know why. So Hulk Hogan could get his win back, beat the Ultimate Warrior. Honestly, I feel that that's the only reason they brought Ultimate Warrior to WCW, was so Hogan could get his win back. It started off very promising. Ultimate Warrior coming out, getting a huge pop. I mean, one of the biggest pops you'll ever hear if you watch wrestling over the years. I mean, Ultimate Warrior was just tremendously over with the fans. They were chanting Warrior, and they were just going nuts. But the angles leading up to the match, I mean, some of the worst television you'll ever see. I mean, there's the incident with the mirror. Hulk Hogan was seeing the Ultimate Warrior in a mirror, and everybody else was seeing it, and the announcers were seeing it. The only person that wasn't seeing it was Eric Bischoff, and he was asking Hogan if he was nuts. It was just so stupid, made no sense. You had the whole thing with the trap door and the smoke. Ultimate Warrior coming out of trap doors and attacking Hogan. And then, you'd have all the NWO guys in the ring. Then it would fill up with smoke. And then when the smoke cleared, all the guys would be laid out. It was so stupid. And it was so bad that the fans turned on the Warrior. The Warrior got the big pop when he first came in. And then by the time Halloween Havoc came along, Ultimate Warrior was getting booed out of the building. And, don't even get me started with the match. I mean, one of the worst matches ever, Hogan and Warrior at Halloween Havoc, just awful. The Great Khali versus Batista. And, I think Great Khali, a lot of people name Great Khali in various feuds for the worst feud. This one stands out to me because of the basketball promo. Great Khali, to show what he was going to do to Batista, he took a basketball and gave it that grip, the head grip. And Batista said, "You're not going to get in the ring with a basketball. Basketballs don't hold grudges." And, that infamous line, that was entertaining. But, yeah, we had to endure a bunch of Great Khali and Batista matches, including a Punjabi prison match Which, I mean, there was one highlight in that match with Batista doing the leap from one part of the cage to the other, but the rest of that match was just brutal, and the entire feud, we all would like to forget it. Hornswoggle versus Chavo Guerrero. All I have to do is say Hornswoggle, and it's going to be bad. The thing that sucked about this feud so bad is that it basically killed Chavo Guerrero's career. It ruined any credibility that he had, and he never recovered after this. They were doing these skits where Chavo kept getting embarrassed by Hornswoggle week after week after week, and it just went on for way too long, and it was a career killer for Chavo Guerrero. I mean, he went to TNA and all, but he was never a key player in WWE again after that. Scott Steiner versus Test. Scott Steiner came into WWE with a lot of fanfare, and he got this huge ovation at Survivor Series in 2002. But then he had the really bad feud with Triple H, and that is also a feud that people have named. Scott Steiner versus Triple H. The Royal Rumble match was a disaster. The crowd completely turned against Scott Steiner. He kept botching moves. And then Triple H and Scott Steiner had the follow-up, and that wasn't good either. And then you had Scott Steiner versus Test, feuding over Stacy Keibler. And it was just one bad television segment after another. And, their matches were not good. I remember the one match they had, and Scott Steiner tripped on the apron. I mean, it was really embarrassing and, just not entertaining. John Cena versus RTruth. This is, I think, one of the best examples of how not to build up a guy as a number one contender. WWE turned RTruth heel, and they were building him up to challenge John Cena for the WWE title. So how do you build up a heel for this match? Well, the way WWE did it is they had RTruth just run out of the ring and get himself counted out. That's how they build him up. Usually, you build up a guy by having him lay out the champion or beat the champion. Not in this case. RTruth gets counted out, and you're supposed to pluck down $60 to see him challenge John Cena for the title. And of course, Capital Punishment bombed on pay-per-view, and the match wasn't good either because nobody took RTruth seriously. So I mean, that whole feud was just a complete waste of time, and clearly just a placeholder. They needed to fill up time between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, so they just threw RTruth in there to feud with Cena. Ultimate Warrior versus Papa Shango. I was a kid, and normally I was entertained by all the goofiness and the cartoonish aspect of WWE, but I mean, the thing they did with this feud was just so stupid that I think it turned a lot of people off of wrestling completely. And you had the Ultimate Warrior, and you had the cell phone going off, but you had the Ultimate Warrior coming out for a promo, and then all of a sudden Papa Shango puts this voodoo curse on him or whatever, and you have like blood or something pouring down the Warrior's head. I mean, it was so ridiculous, and I think it's one of those moments where people were embarrassed to say they were wrestling fans, and I'm not even sure if they ever had a proper match. I mean, they may have wrestled on house shows or whatever, but it's not like they had a big SummerSlam match to blow off the feud. I mean, it just kind of faded away, and that was the end of it. So just really no purpose that it served. Torrie Wilson versus Dawn Marie. I actually have a Divas feud on here because this one was so notoriously bad. I mean, you built this feud around Torrie Wilson's dad, Al Wilson, and Dawn Marie and Al Wilson end up having an affair, and we see a segment of them in bed, and then Al Wilson has a heart attack and dies. So this is their storyline here, that Al Wilson dies having sex with Dawn Marie, and then they have a funeral segment with the corpse in the casket, and then the two of them are fighting. I can't even talk about this without laughing. The casket falls over with his body. It was just one of the stupidest things ever. I apologize. Just thinking about it, I mean, that was... What were they thinking? What were they smoking when they came up with that storyline? I mean, I don't even know. Big Boss Man versus Al Snow. I actually like the segment where Big Boss Man fed Al Snow his dog. This storyline was built around Al Snow's dog and Big Boss Man stealing the dog, and he ends up cooking it and serving it to Al Snow. It was so stupid, but I was entertained by it. Some grade A pepper, and then you have Al Snow. Like Al Snow sitting in a chair. He sits up. The chair stays attached to his butt, and then you have Big Boss Man hit him with the cookie sheet in the hotel room. I mean, another segment. I'm sure Vince Russo came up with this one. What was he thinking? And then it led to the Kennel from Hell match. Wow, what a disaster this match was. Just one of the worst matches ever. One of the most famous bad matches, I think, in WWE history. And you had a bunch of dogs surrounding the cage, and the dogs were, relieving themselves. I mean, and then you had the two guys trying to have a match. I mean, come on now. I don't even know what else to say about that one. Hulk Hogan versus Sting. Oh, and by the way, a lot of people mentioned Big Show versus Big Boss Man, Big Show, Big Boss Man feud. I liked that feud. I liked the funeral segment. I know it was stupid, but Big Show surfing with the casket. I was entertained by that, and Big Show cutting a promo on Big Show's dad who died, reading a poem. I mean, it was so much in bad taste, but I actually liked that feud. Next up, Hulk Hogan versus Sting from TNA. Talk about not learning from the past. Hulk Hogan and Sting had feuded in WCW for a few years, and their final feud in WCW was in 1999, and it was a bomb. It failed at the box office. WCW turned Sting heel, and it was a complete disaster. And the ratings tanked, everything tanked, house show attendance, pay-per-view buy rates. It was very embarrassing. So you would think that these guys would never feud again, but no. You have TNA in 2010, 11, 12 years later, trying to do this feud again. You have Sting come out. This was during TNA's attempt to do the Monday Night Wars again with WWE. And you had Sting come out, and it looks like he's going to help Hulk Hogan. But bam, he turns on Hogan, and Sting apparently is a heel. Why Sting is a heel, I don't know. Especially after it didn't work, why do it again? TNA, they'd already turned him heel in the Main Event Mafia, and that didn't work. So they turn him heel again, and for the next 6 months, you have Sting trying to end the Hulk Hogan regime in TNA. And then it all leads up to Bound for Glory, and Hulk Hogan turns heel. So Sting, in the storyline, was right all along. Hulk Hogan was up to no good. He was coming to TNA to only for himself and because of his own agenda, because he wanted to be the top guy. So Sting was right in the storyline, and then Sting just disappears for a while, and then Sting comes back the next year, 2011, and he turns into the Joker. Basically, he develops this Joker persona, and it's so stupid. And you have all these segments with Hogan and Sting, and it's just really bad television. And then it actually leads up to a match. We actually have to see Hulk Hogan, a guy who's almost 60, can barely walk, let alone wrestle, in there with Sting, another guy who's well past his prime. So we have Hulk Hogan versus Sting, and Sting wins, and the stipulation is if he wins, he gets control of WCW back for Dixie Carter. So, okay, fine. Sting is now in control of WCW, and Hulk Hogan turns babyface, and that's the end of it. But then Sting decides to give control of TNA back to Hulk Hogan. So all that, over a year of feuding, and Sting finally wins control of it, he gives it back to Hogan. I mean, come on now. I mean, it made no sense. And, just two guys that are well past their prime that shouldn't be hogging the spotlight. That's the bottom line. Hulk Hogan versus the Dungeon of Doom. You want to talk about just some awful television, go back and watch some of the Nitros from 1995. Hulk Hogan and the Dungeon of Doom, I mean, it was some of the most ridiculous storylines you'll ever see, and some of the worst wrestling you'll ever see, too. Hulk Hogan versus the Zodiac, and, Halloween Havoc of that year in 95 sticks out the most to me. Hogan and the Giant doing the monster truck battle, and Giant accidentally falls off the roof, and you think he's dead, and Hulk Hogan with his Academy Award acting, I guess, reacting to Big Show falling off. And then, so you think the Giant Big Show is dead, but then he comes out for the main event without a scratch. And then they actually have a match. And then you have this guy dressed up like a mummy coming out. And then Giant and the Mummy double hump Hulk Hogan in the ring. So I mean that moment stands out the most to me. But there were so many stupid segments during that feud, and then Hulk Hogan goes to the dark side, and oh my God, I can't even comment on any further. Just look up clips on YouTube, and I mean if you never saw them before, if you saw them before, you know what I'm talking about. But just look up the stuff like Halloween Havoc, Hogan and the Giant. Some of the worst wrestling segments you'll ever see. And I remember the uncensored match too, the cage match, and they brought in Z Gangsta, aka Zeus from the late '90s with No Holds Barred. They brought him back, and wow, that was one of the worst matches of all time too. That uncensored cage match, Hogan and Savage versus the Dungeon of Doom. Goldberg versus Vince Russo. Wow, wow, wow. Goldberg had this match at New Blood Rising with Kevin Nash and Scott Steiner, a triple threat, and Goldberg did not like the finish of the match, so he decided to just leave the ring. And this was WCW completely breaking character and just admitting that wrestling is fake, that Goldberg refused to go by the script. This was just about the worst thing you can do, is tell the audience that what they're watching is not real. And then it led to a bunch of terrible promos with Vince Russo and Goldberg, and just trying to mix real life with fiction. It was going too far. I mean, it's cool to do it every now and then a little bit, but this was going way too far, to the point where nobody had any idea what was going on, and nobody knew how to react to anything. And WCW just sunk to the lowest they had ever been, and there was really no point of recovery after this. I mean, Goldberg was pretty much finished, not even over as a character anymore, and Vince Russo had done his damage in WCW. It was just brutal, the stuff they were doing during this period. I mean, August, September 2000. Just what was he thinking? I don't think he cared at that point. I think Vince Russo was just like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do to amuse myself. All right, Triple H versus Kane from 2002. What an awful feud this was, and I think people remember this feud best for the infamous Katie Vick segment, where Triple H humped the dead corpse, former girlfriend of Kane from high school. And many people point this out as one of the worst segments ever in wrestling history, a segment that made you not want to watch, made you very embarrassed to be a fan. And the matches weren't good either. I mean, the No Mercy match was boring, and the matches they had just weren't very entertaining. And you had, it did end on an interesting note where Triple H did unmask Kane, and that led to a new direction with Kane's character. But everything else about this feud, I don't even want to talk about. And finally, in my opinion, the number one worst feud in wrestling history, the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. I think that this feud did more damage to WCW than anything else in the company's history. And there was a lot of bad stuff over the years in WCW. But this, I think ruined them for good, and they were never going to recover after this. First of all, I think fans wanted to cheer for the young guys, and the idea is to build up the young guys and have them beat the old guys. But it was a complete opposite here. The old guys were the baby faces, and the young guys that aren't getting the breaks are the heels. So I mean, first of all, it doesn't make sense in that regard. You have Billy Kidman lay out Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan's running around backstage saying he's going to eat his ass, and that first Nitro that they did where they started the feud, it was an interesting show, but it was a complete clusterfuck. It was all over the place. You had a million things happening, and of course this feud. I'm talking about this feud here, and how can I not mention David Arquette? David Arquette comes in and actually wins the WCW title, and people will point to that as perhaps the single worst moment in WCW history when Arquette won the title. And you just had one bad segment after another. I remember one segment where Kevin Nash was running the New Blood Gauntlet, and guys were running outside, and guys were coming in the ring. It was just a mess, and you had Kevin Nash pinning guys without actually having to touch them. And then the Ric Flair thing with Vince Russo, they shaved Ric Flair's head, and Goldberg's heel turn. I could just go on and on and on with stuff. Heel turns every week, titles changing every week. In my opinion, no doubt the worst feud in wrestling history. All right, that'll do it for my thoughts on the worst feuds in wrestling history. This was actually a pretty long video here. I mean, I could go on. There are so many bad feuds out there. I could spend another half hour talking about it. But let me know what you think. Which feuds do you think were the worst in wrestling history? Leave a comment. YouTube.com/NoDQCW. And stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in WWE and TNA.